welcome to another podblast from Hopinions. This one's a little bit different from the previous shows that we've done because it includes a segment that we had recorded with Pete McKerry that was due to go out on this week's show, where we was talking about the news story of Burning Sky removing their beers from Brewdog bars. And then the day after, we got notification that James Watt had left a reply on the original blog post on the Total Hours website. And then we were also lucky enough to be at the same event with Matt Curtis that evening. So we got Matt's thoughts on it as well. So what you're going to hear is the original segment that was removed from this week's show, first of all, because that gives you our views as we were discussing it on the show and sets the context a little bit. And then from that, we'll go into the interview that we did with Matt. Enjoy! But my two news items this week are about Brewdog and not necessarily in the positive light. So, firstly, the story that was broke on Thursday, Wednesday, some point last week, who knows. And this first appeared on Total Hours, www.totalhours.co.uk. And this was the news that Burning Sky were pulling all of its beer from Brewdog bars. Now, this was quite a statement in terms of Burning Sky are a lot of people's up-and-coming brewery in the UK right now in terms of what they're producing. For them to actually say we're not servicing Brewdog bars anymore, it's quite a big statement. Do you not think?
I think it's a huge statement. I mean, I love Burning Sky. I think their beers are exceptional. I wish actually we were drinking a Burning Sky saison actually at the moment. It's a big deal. It's a massive big deal. But I just worry about the effect that this may have on up and coming breweries who Brewdog engage to get selling their beers in their pubs. I think it potentially preemptively besmirches that relationship. Is that the right word? Besmirches? I don't know. But I think it's okay saying, okay, we're not going to stock our beers in Brewdog. But you did, and it was useful up to a point,
yeah.
And it, I'm happy for Burning Sky that they're at a position now, business model wise, where they don't need to rely on Brewdog. But I'm very ambivalent about Brewdog, and I do criticise them, but I think they're very good for emerging UK breweries, in terms of exposure and and also the bottom line and buying their beer basically. So I just worry about the negative connotations that this might place on any emerging brewery that associates with Brewdog. I mean, principles are all fine as long as you can afford them. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So.
I've got to say, firstly, kudos for being the first person ever to use the word besmirch on one of our podcasts, which is
I'm not sure it's appropriate use.
No, but it's a fantastic word. I do love that word.
We'll try and slot it in next time.
As well. If we do not besmirch all the way to the end of the season, then we're not doing ourselves justice. But I agree with what you're saying in terms of breweries essentially using Brewdog for exposure to get to a wider audience.
It's a lifeline, I would suggest.
It's almost like, it does feel a little bit like, as you say, Burning Sky have gone, well, we've got what we want from you, and fuck you now, we're off, we're all right on our own, we don't need you.
Yeah, I think you have to be careful when you're Brewdog have been a victim of their punk rhetoric. Obviously they're not punks, and it's come back to haunt them a few times. So I think whenever you express your principles in a business context, you need to be very sure about where you're going, because it may well come back to haunt you.
Yep. And the other Brewdog story this week is...
Sorry, can I just say I thought it was really childish.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it was no less childish than when they ripped off Camden Hells off the bar.
It's almost the reverse of it, isn't it?
Yeah, it's pathetic.
Okay.
Strong words.
As always, we're keen to hear from our listeners on this one, so let us know what you think about Burning Sky removing their beers from Brewdog. And why we are besmirching Brewdog.
So you're just going to use this word the whole time now?
Thank you very much. Nothing you've
He's almost going to try and trademark it now.
Okay, so we're chatting with Mr. Matt Curtis. Matt, how are you doing?
I'm very well, Steve. How are you?
I'm good, thanks. Just wanted to grab a few words with you about the record-breaking post on your website, apparently. The Burning Sky post about removing the beers from Brewdog. I suppose first question, how did that come about? Was that did you approach Mark or did Mark approach you? Where did it come from?
I know the Burning Sky guys quite well. I hung out with them for a couple of days at the brewery earlier in the year for a piece I'm working on for Good Beer Hunting. And we get on really well. We like the same music, we like a lot of the same beers, and they kind of mentioned it to me in passing, like, oh, we're doing this. And I ran with it. I was just like, oh, I'm going to do this. I think this is huge. The reason I think it's huge is because I can see other breweries seeing it and going, oh, actually, I'd rather sell my beer through other channels as well. And it's interesting because a lot of people have come back, including James Watt, have come back and said, this is a marketing stunt by Burning Sky, and it's not.
You can see how it sounds like one.
Undoubtedly. Brewdog themselves have used this tactic for the last decade. Yeah. This is what they do. This is Mark Tranter mentioned to me in passing, and it wasn't like an email saying, "Oh, we're doing this." It was a text, and it was me that went, "Oh, like I could have done anything I wanted with that information," and I don't think there was any motive behind it. Like Burning Sky aren't a brewery that. Not only do they want to do things like that, but they don't need to. That the amount of beer they produce is quite small, but also very popular. They sell out every week, so they don't have any extra beer to sell. They're not crowdfunding. They're not trying to grow another. They're not trying to buy more fermenters or anything like that.
So if they hadn't told you, would we have found out about it?
No, you probably would not. No,
because I never really noticed Burning Sky at Brewdog anyway.
No.
So I just wouldn't have noticed they're not being sold there.
I would say Burning Sky's sales into Brewdog are probably less than 1% of their annual turnover. Mark. What you have to understand about Mark Tranter is he really is a punk. He is involved with the punk community. He plays bass in a band. If you ever met him, he's always wearing a T-shirt of a band that you might never have heard of before. He has lived that lifestyle. It's for him. It's about the music. But it's also about being irreverent about capitalism, and he runs a business, which is it's hard to be irreverent when you do that. But Burning Sky have an ethos where they go in at 9 o'clock on a Monday morning, they finish 5 o'clock on a Friday. They only brew 4 or 5 times a week. They're not like brewing around the clock. They make as much beer as they need to make to make their living. They make their 2 cask beers, their couple of keg hoppy beers, but then most of their time is spent putting beer in wood and playing around with yeast and bacteria and producing fantastic saisons and soon to be sours that they're doing spontaneous fermentation, which any brewer will tell you there's no money in that because it takes a lot of time to make beer like that. If anyone's been opportunistic here, it's me, because I saw the story and I dressed it up. I could have put a lot of opinion into it, but and I have opinions about all of it. Which I'm happy to talk about, but I decided in terms of breaking the news, I'd rather let both of the breweries talk about it themselves. That's news. So I emailed Brewdog. I asked Mark some questions and said, look, can you elaborate a bit more for me?
So Brewdog knew that post was going live.
So Mark sent Brewdog an email several weeks ago.
Yeah.
And then he mentioned in passing to me, but it was more like Mark Tranter doesn't get angry. He just wants to make beer, but it's just some of the language Brewdog use in terms of punk, and it's a lot of the other comments I saw were people saying, oh, it's months since the draft punk thing, it's months since the Lone Wolf thing, but like his beer, Mark doesn't rush things, so he sort of sat on this, and it's more probably just one night he's going, I just don't want to sell my beer to Brewdog anymore. It's just he told me, and I decided to make it into a news story. But it turns out, and as I had a feeling it would, not quite as much as I expected, but I had a feeling it would capture a lot of people. That Brewdog have a lot of supporters, and I think Brewdog make excellent beers. They make beers for a different market now than what they you know, you can credit them with building craft beer up, certainly, but they definitely, their audience is now the mass market, not the craft beer market. You know, they try and cling on to the craft beer market with collabs with Cloudwater and the like, but without that, you know, they're a supermarket brand, you know, and it's a great beer, and I'd rather see that in the supermarket than Carling. But I think they have to be honest with themselves about you know, something I was thinking about. I was musing on this today. You know, Brewdog have always said that they're different, they're changing the game, and Equity for Punks is very different in the way they've grown a business. But actually, most of the way they've grown their business through bank loans and now through a serious amount of private equity, growing a core range, going into supermarkets, building a chain of bars, all they've done is follow the exact same pattern as every sort of traditional brewery in the UK has done to build a big business. So they've actually become what they have always railed against, and that, you know, they want to float on the stock exchange. Is that punk?
Can you not see that there's also a point of view here, though, that some people may be saying, well, actually Burning Sky have got what they wanted out of it. They've used Brewdog as a stepping stone to get their beers to a wider market, and now they don't feel as though they need it anymore. But what are your thoughts about that side of things?
They don't need to get their beers to a wider market because, as I said earlier, they all the beer they make, they sell. So it's. I saw it as news in terms of relevant to beer cultures, which is why I ran with it. I'm not, you know, I don't care how much beer Burning Sky sell or Brewdog sell. I just thought it was a fascinating story. I tell it, you know, it's an interesting story. When I emailed Brewdog, initially I said, I hear a brewery has told you they're not selling beers anymore. I didn't mention the brewery, and they said, "Oh, you mean Verdant?" And I was like, no. And so I actually phoned the Verdant guys, and it's a different situation that you know, I won't go into now. But Verdant aren't selling beers to Brewdog either for their own reasons, not ethos reasons. But yeah, and I was going to add into the story, but I had the paragraph there, but I actually took it out because it had nothing to do with what I wanted to talk about, which was Brewdog have had this ethos of being a punk brewery, and being punk as being anti-capitalism, staying true to your roots. And I will say, I know I've got friends that work for Brewdog. I think they make exceptional beer, and you know, and as James Watt pointed out, they employ over 1,000 people in the UK brewing industry, and in addition to that, they put hundreds more into the brewing industry. But they're not punk, and they need to sort of look in the mirror and say, okay, we're a big business, and we don't have to act like one, but they do. I mean, when I emailed them for a quote, it was going through their press office and then waiting several days for a response.
But yet James Watt is quite happy to go on and publicly respond to your post.
Oh yeah, but that was after he saw that it got a lot of hits, right?
Yeah.
And you know, just as a comparison, I've done news about other people like Miller Coors, and when I interviewed Miller, I just had a one-to-one conversation with the director at Miller, and it was like talking to Mark or any craft brewery. I interview people all the time, as you do. So you know, just in dealing with Brewdog, it's like dealing with a big corporation, and I think, as I said, they just probably need to realise what they are. You know, and the language they're using is the language of a small company, but they're not. They're worth £1 billion. So I think it's important. Yeah, I understand how it can be seen as a Burning Sky marketing ploy, but they just don't need it. It's just generally a pissed off punk, a real punk. It's just a bit of reaction, and you know, he tossed me the ball, and I decided to take wickets with it.
Have you been surprised at the response?
Yeah, I have. I've got a very visited website. I try and write about my experience of beer, and I don't do a lot of news stuff. And I could have sold this to you know, I'm a journalist in the beer world. I could have sold this to someone, but I just thought, no, I think I'd want to use my own site, and I think it's a good vehicle for this, because again, there's no money involved. I make no money on Total Ales, so it's just generally like, here's the thing that happened, and I got both sides. They both had their say. I put it out there. I could have, as I said earlier, I could have put my spin on it, and that would have been. I wrote my spin. It was quite cynical, as you might have just heard in that. No, it's just about telling the story and creating that ripple effect. You know, this is. It's almost like just giving Brewdog a spoonful of their own medicine. They can't say that this is how they haven't done marketing for the last 10 years, right? I don't feel guilty about doing a bit of that myself. I think people are interested. I think what's important to say is Brewdog have a lot of support, and they have these fans, and I think that's incredible. They have the equity punks that support them. I think to say Burning Sky are going to sell more beer as a result of it, it's not true. They're going to carry on as they are. People might turn their head and go, "Oh, Burning Sky," but in 6 months, actually, people will just remember Burning Sky for making beer. And I'd like to talk about Brewdog about making beer. They come up in the news every week. You have the Elvis Juice thing. It's like and then you've got the Beer Geek Awards. Like, when are you just going to talk about the beer you're making, guys? It's like that's what I like to hear from breweries, and it was, I guess, that was my reaction. It was just like, well, this is why I want to put this story out there.
Well, what we'll do is we're going to link through to the original story in the show notes. So if anybody hasn't read it yet, encourage our listeners to go through, read it, and share their own views.
Yeah, and you've got all the comments on there as well.
Yeah. And people know my Twitter handle, Total Curtis. They can give me what for on Twitter. I think it's just important to stress that it's not Burning Sky. Were not the aggressor here. That was me, and I just thought it was relevant to this culture of craft beer we've built up, and I wanted to put it out there and see what happens. And judging by the reaction, it's a lot of people interested in it. So I'll be interested to see what will happen in the following weeks.
Well, folks, I'd suggest letting Matt know your comments.
Yeah, definitely.
At Total Curtis, as you say.
Cheers, guys.
Cheers, mate. Thanks. Appreciate it.